This Day Live with Mickey and Willy.
Good evening and welcome to This Strange Life. I am Mickey, the conduit between the freaks and the geeks.
All right, I'm Willy. Good to be here.
Oh, and this is Jimmy the Chin, a.k.a. Ryan Breadbin.
And today we're super pumped for this episode. We've got a wonderful guy from the UK, a political activist, former solicitor, author extraordinaire, and advocate for Madeleine McCann. Tony Bennett, are you there? Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, good afternoon. In brief, I'm 70 years old. I've done a variety of things in my career, including being a solicitor for a while and a political activist for a while. That's perfectly true. And in recent years, I've been looking in particular at cases of criminal cases where there's been a cover-up or police corruption or both. And I wouldn't necessarily describe myself as an advocate for Madeleine McCann, but I think a researcher into matters concerning Madeleine McCann has occupied a great deal of my time now for 11 years.
Wow. So for our listeners, Tony, can you just give a little bit of a background into the Madeleine McCann case? And just in case, I mean, I'm sure that most of the world is familiar with this case now. It's such a interesting story, but can you just... perhaps just
I think,
give a little bit of background.
I think there's no one in the world who's got a television or the internet who doesn't know the name Madeleine McCann. But of course, the story began on the morning of the 4th of May, 2007, when all of a sudden the newswaves were flooded with the story of how this young girl, Madeleine McCann, had been abducted. And it was a very strange story. I remember very clearly the first reports and saying to my wife that I thought there was something funny. And I'm by no means the only one. Thousands of other people thought this story was not quite right. And one of the things that struck me was that the initial news stories said that the children were leaving, the parents were leaving the children every night and checking on them every 15 minutes. Or then another version was checking on them every 30 minutes. And then another version was checking on them every hour. Well, two things about that. Why all the discrepancies, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and 1 hour? But more relevantly, who on earth goes out dining in the evening and then goes back 200 yards to the apartment to check? It just didn't add up. It made no sense at all. And so that really was the beginning of my interest, and it developed as the story developed over the following months.
So Madeleine was she was English, right? And I believe that she had there was a couple of twins as well, so she wasn't the only child, if I'm correct, Tony. And
Madeleine was 3 years, nearly 4 at the time of this event. Yeah, and there were 2 younger children. Twins, nearly 2 years old.
And at the time, they were on holiday. I think it was Portugal, wasn't it?
They were on holiday for a week's holiday in Portugal, and yes, they are British.
Yeah. So, so this is 2007.
Yeah, and just set the scene for our listeners, Tony. Madeleine's parents, they're well-to-do people. They're doctors.
The doctors, weren't they? Yeah.
Right? So they're not... You might associate people who leave their children without babysitters to be less than reputable people, but these are 2 well-qualified, well-respected doctors here. I mean, this is crazy that they were leaving their children without supervision.
Both qualified doctors. Jerry McCann was a cardiologist and is now Professor McCann. And Kate McCann was a part-time general practitioner. And they went on holiday with 7 friends, 4 of whom were also doctors. So it was a very medical little group. It was a high-powered group, if you like.
Wow, I mean that raises some questions in itself.
And they were traveling to a resort, is that right? Some kind of quaint little resort, and they were all there together as a big group. Interesting.
And I remember when this first hit the TVs, and it reminded me of what the John Benet Ramsey case would have been like, just with the saturated media coverage and all the speculation.
2007 was kind of the start of the Twitter era too.
Yeah,
and, but I'm sure Tony can sort of take us through that in more detail. But it really was sort of wall to wall coverage.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. And I believe you are correct in drawing parallels with the John Benet Ramsey case. In fact, I would say there are a great many parallels worth close scrutiny. But again, we had in the John Benet Ramsey case, we had a very wealthy man. I can't remember his name now. Was it John Ramsey, the father?
Yeah.
But he was wealthy, moved in high circles. And of course, that was a tragic story. We still don't know quite who killed John Benet Ramsey, but the evidence points to the family, I think, in that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we just had Melinda Kula on, Tony, just for your interest, and she's been an advocate all throughout the years, and she actually presented some new evidence on our show. When was it, Mike? It was about sort of 3 weeks ago, something like that.
We recorded 3 weeks ago, but actually it went out last week.
Okay.
Yeah. But by the time this goes out, yes, it'll probably be a few weeks. But yeah, Melinda had some very compelling evidence, didn't she?
Yeah.
So, Tony, there were a couple of things that just didn't make sense.
Before we get into that, can we finish the story of what happened that night?
That's a great point, actually, Willy. Yeah. So, actually, Willy, you're dead right. We need to set the scene for our listeners, don't we? So, they were out at dinner. The doctors, the parents were doctors, and they were out with a group of friends. They were enjoying their sort of wine and dinner, and the kids were left. How far away was the room, Tony, from where they were eating?
Well, as the crow flies, something like about 50 or 60 yards. If you walk the distance between the restaurant and the room, we're talking about a distance of 100 to 200 yards, about a minute or two's walk.
Too far, though, right? I mean, too far when you're talking about... It's crazy.
And what sort of time? What sort of time was this local time?
Let me just explain that. Let me just tell you what the official version of events is.
Yes,
the McCann's version of events and the official version. The official version is that all week they were dining in the tapas restaurant nearby and checking on the children every half hour. Now, if we run through the events of that evening, the claim is made that Jerry McCann saw Madeleine alive at 9:10. And she wasn't seen alive, according to Jerry McCann and everybody else, thereafter. So the theory that's been put forward, the abduction theory, is that she was taken from her bed after 9:10 that evening, and the alarm was raised at 10 o'clock. Now, I'm sure you'll want to go into this in more detail, but there is a rival theory put forward by the Portuguese police, and they believe that this was a complete hoax, that the abduction story was invented to cover the fact that Madeleine was already dead. That is it in a nutshell.
Right. Okay. So is this the sort of line of investigation that you tend to go down then, Tony? That she was already dead at the time?
Yes, I think I can say that on the record. I've got to be very careful what I do say because I'm under a court order here not to libel the McCanns. But what I can say to you is that, yes, there is an alternative view on the case, and that is the view I've tended to follow for the past 10 years.
Okay.
But as I say, I can't actually suggest to you that she is dead. All I can say on the record is that many people believe that, including the Portuguese police.
And can you give us a couple of reasons as to why they might think that? I mean, this situation with the cadaver dogs is a big one, Tony.
Well, I think for many of us, the cadaver dogs is a crucial issue. You'll need to allow me a little bit of time to just explain the background to this. Very briefly, about 3 months after Madeleine's disappearance, the head investigator of the Portuguese police, Gonçalo Amaral, contacted British police for advice, telling the British police that he suspected that Madeleine was dead. And the British police advised him to use one of the world's top dog handlers, Martin Grime, to take his 2 dogs, Eddie and Keeler, to Portugal. And by the way, Martin Grime is now a top dog handler for the FBI. He is really the top man in the world, really, on dog handling. Now, these dogs have got the ability to detect all kinds of things, as you probably know, not just bodies, but drugs, explosives, all manner of things. It's a constantly developing technology. And they have also got the capacity to detect where a corpse might have been. Not an actual corpse, but where a corpse might have been, because the scent of a human corpse is so powerful that it lingers and can be detected months later. And that's the basis on which the dogs came to Portugal. And I just want to run through very quickly, it won't be long, but the odour of a cadaver of a human corpse was detected in 11 separate places connected with the McCanns.
Wow. Oh, my God.
In the house, on their clothes, in the car, in their hired car.
Wow.
And also body fluids were found and some blood, which could well have belonged to Madeleine McCann. Now, I'll just add one thing at this point, and that is that there is no evidence of any other person having died in that apartment.
Okay.
So if the dogs were alerting correctly to the scent of a corpse, they could only be alerting to the scent of Madeleine McCann.
Very interesting. So it's not like that there was another case of somebody dying in that room, 6 months previous, that she was the only reported death in that.
Well, that's pretty compelling evidence, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, to many people, that is compelling. Now, I need to say for the record here that in terms of bringing this case to court, it's generally accepted that Martin Grime's evidence would not be allowed unless it's backed up by compelling forensic evidence as well.
Mm.
So that is rather lacking in this case. There isn't a body of forensic evidence which actually backs up these dogs' findings. What we do have is a lot of circumstantial evidence, which some people say confirms that the dog's alerts may have been correct, but it would not stand up in court without some other forensic evidence.
Are you at liberty to tell us what that circumstantial evidence is, Tony?
Well, I can go through most certainly some of the circumstantial evidence.
Please do, yeah.
As long as I stick to the facts, I can tell you what those facts are.
Yeah.
The circumstantial evidence would be, for example, major changes of story by those involved, by the McCanns and their friends. Major contradictions in their evidence. It would also, for example, include body language and the words they use. There is a video made of a statement analyst in the United States, Peter Hyatt, who's analysed the interviews, the content of them, and has drawn conclusions from that. So yes, there is a variety of circumstantial evidence, which of course is sufficient in some cases to achieve a conviction. Sometimes without a body, if there is sufficient circumstantial evidence, there are cases where a conviction can be secured.
Okay. So that's the cadaver dogs then, and that's the circumstantial evidence surrounding that. Can I ask you something, Tony? Do Jerry and I'm sorry, what was Kate? Do Jerry and Kate do they have an explanation for what the cadaver dogs might have found?
That's a very good question. When they were first confronted with this evidence, they were shown a video of Martin Grime taking his dogs around their flat, taking the dogs to inspect their clothing, taking the dogs to inspect the car, their hired car. So there is a video in existence which you can see. It's on the internet.
I think
Anybody
I've seen
can see it.
I can remember this, I'm pretty sure.
And you will see the dog getting hugely excited, barking furiously at a little area below the curtains in the living room, below the window. And you can hear Martin Grime on the tape saying, look, this is a clear indication that he is detecting the scent of a cadaver.
And can you give us give us an idea, Tony? Where was that scent within the sort of apartment that they were staying? Was it near her bed? Was it in the? Did you say it was in the living room or? Yeah,
I've got a list of them here, which is taken, by the way, from the Portuguese police report. And
because I think that's compelling.
There were 4 places in the house. One was the living room. The other was the dog alerted to the wardrobe in the McCann's master bedroom.
Interesting, right? Mm.
And then there was an alert on the veranda and an alert in the garden as well.
Okay, so that seems like a clear path from wherever she might have been in the house out to the car or whatever, right?
Well, that is what those who think that. I should just make this point about the cadaver alerts. Now, they may not be able to be used in a court of law without forensic evidence, but for a police officer, they are strong indications, obviously. They may not be able to be used in court as evidence, but these police dogs are not used for fun. They're used because they help the police investigation. And you were asking me what the parents' explanations were. Well, they watched this video with a police officer, and they reacted with all kinds of strange explanations. One of them was that the dog must have got confused with dirty nappies they were carrying in the back of the car.
Right. Is that possible?
That was one version.
Is that possible, Tony?
No, because dogs don't get confused. These dogs are trained to only to alert to the things that they are trained for.
And also, who'd put dirty nappies in the back of their car?
Yeah.
Well, I know. Yes, I know. I know.
That's a great point.
I'll be honest with you. It does sound desperate, doesn't it? Really.
It does.
The other one that was rotting meat. That they were carrying rotting meat in the back of the car.
As you do.
Well, I think you've got the point without me having to make it.
Yeah.
Right.
We're happy to take those leaps for you.
There was a further idea put forward by one of Jerry McCann's relatives, his sister, and that was that the blood in the apartment was caused by mosquitoes flying into the wall.
Oh my God!
Jesus. So there was blood spatter residue on the walls. Then was there?
There were body fluids found in the both in the flat and in the car. The only blood residue was found in the living room where the dog is alerted to the cadaver scent. So on that particular spot in the living room, you've got both the strong scent of a corpse having been in that position, and you've got some blood as well.
And how big? Sorry, Tony. How big would these drops have been? Are we talking sort of microscopic pieces of blood, or which could sort of signify people trying to clean up, or so it's super microscopic.
Well, yes and no. The main find of body fluids and blood was that the police had to actually lift 2 tiles in the living room, in that exact spot I'm talking about, just below the curtains, below the window. The cadaver dog alerted very strongly to that spot. And then the blood dog did the same. And so the police, to get a sample, lifted 2 tiles, I think it was 2 tiles, and then took samples, and they were investigated by the Portuguese Forensic Service and by the Forensic Science Service in Britain as well.
Got you.
Right.
On
So
the forensic evidence, before we go any further, let me just make this point to anticipate what you might ask me. Did it show that Madeleine could have been the the corpse, as it were? Could it have been Madeleine's blood? The answer to that is yes, it could. The forensic information was it could have been Madeleine's blood, but she wasn't excluded, in other words. But when the second forensic samples were taken, it was shown by the laboratory that it could have been other people's blood as well. So the forensic evidence was, shall we say, inconclusive. Could have been Madeleine's blood, might not have been.
Got you.
This just gets crazier and crazier every time I hear it, because there's a lot of I don't know what stage we are here, Tony, whether we can get into what the sort of official narrative is. Are we there yet, Tony, or is there anything else that we need to plumb before we get there?
I think one thing that I was going to get to, and I think you touched on it. One of you mentioned the John Bennett Ramsey case, and
yes.
One of the extraordinary features of this case, which was the thing that really caught my interest in the end, was the extraordinary number of British police officers, security services, agencies like MI5 who suddenly rushed over to Praia da Luz in the first 10 days. Now I've sent you a list of that, of the people who went over, and it's a huge list of police officers from Leicestershire, staff from MI5, staff from Special Branch. Then there was a government-sponsored agency called Control Risks Group. 2 ambassadors descended on Praia da Luz straight away. And also, and this was the thing that got me hooked on the case, really, after 3 weeks, Tony Blair, who was the Prime Minister then, sent the head of his media unit, Clarence Mitchell, to Praia da Luz to supervise operations. Now, Tony Blair had a very big media unit, 40 strong, cost a fortune. Clarence Mitchell was the director of that unit. He ran it. And I hope you can understand me when I say to you that when I learned that Tony Blair sent the boss of his media unit to Praia da Luz, Portugal, I smelt a rat, to be honest. I thought, well, what is there about this case that means that the head of his media spinning unit has to go to Portugal? There must be something more to this case.
Tony, it's so interesting that you say this. We had a guy called William Ramsey on a few weeks ago who's an expert on, amongst other things, the Smiley Face Killers and the West Memphis 3. And he made the point that in many of these murder cases, you're being manipulated by what's it called? Edward Bernays.
Like PR.
PR, yeah, exactly. It's like a PR stunt, the whole thing, and you're being you don't realise that you're being kind of influenced by these narratives that these master sort of media manipulators are
I think
forcing on you.
One of the interesting things is how this media manipulation started from the very first broadcasts, which were on the Friday morning. And if you go back and listen to those early broadcasts, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock on the Friday morning, there was one story that dominated, which was the Madeleine McCann story. And on each of those broadcasts, we had interviews with the McCann's friends and supporters, who all said that they'd had calls from Jerry McCann overnight saying Madeleine's been abducted, Madeleine's gone, and adding to that, somebody's broken through the shutters and crashed through the door. So there was, I can take you to the exact quotes, there was 4 of them. One was Jill Renshaw, there was a couple of relatives, and then John Corner, who was the godfather of one of the McCann's children. They all told the media that they'd had a call from Jerry McCann saying the shutters have been broken into, smashed to bits, door broken through, and so on. So the media promoted this idea right from the off that there was a violent entry. and Madeleine was taken away. Now, I must tell you, without going into too much detail, that story collapsed within 24 hours.
That's fast.
Because the police and the manager of the Ocean Club down in Praia da Luz examined the shutters, examined the window, examined the doors, and there was no sign whatsoever of forced entry. None at all.
Something that I'm interested in is the room that Madeleine was sleeping in. Were there any other kids in that room at the time when the parents were at dinner?
I'm awfully sorry, I didn't hear that too well.
I'm saying the room that Madeleine McCann was asleep in the night that she was abducted or went missing, there were other children in their suite or flat. What about in the room that she was sleeping in? Were there other kids also in there?
Always assuming that Madeleine was actually alive that night, which is something that may or may not be true. But if she was, then yes, the three of them were together in the same room, yes.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that raises some questions in itself, doesn't it?
Right. So, if an abductor went in there and was either able to be so cat burglar silent that the other kids weren't alarmed, or they didn't get abducted, you just kind of, that doesn't really hold up to the my smell test,
Yeah, because you'd think if one kid's kind of getting pulled out of bed and it's been as you said a minute ago, Tony, in inverted commas, a violent entry, then the other kids are probably going to be alerted, aren't they, and be awake. So how
even as the story stands, go on, yeah.
No, Tony, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah. Even as the story stands, the McCanns changed their story. This is one of the changes of story I was going to come to. The McCanns changed their story to say that they must have left the doors unlocked. So when the story about the shutters being broken collapsed, they said, "Oh no, actually we must have left the patio door open, and therefore the abductor got in that way." Now, even then, and bearing in mind it was dark at the time, it was dark at 9 o'clock already, and there was no lighting seen. The abductor would have to find his way into the apartment, find one of the children, and take that child away without disturbing either Madeleine or the other two children. Now, that would be quite a feat in itself, but then to leave no forensic trace at all, no footmarks, no thumbprints, no sign of, no forensic trace whatsoever, no hairs, nothing at all, is obviously another puzzle.
That's interesting, Tony. So when forensics had been in the apartment, there were no DNA. There was no DNA outside the families in there. Or sorry, I should say no DNA that couldn't otherwise be explained. Yeah,
there was no DNA from any stranger at all. One of the strange things, now you've mentioned it, was that there was, and if you can believe this, they could not find any of Madeleine's DNA in that apartment to test.
Huh.
Wow.
This is quite extraordinary, and people have written long screeds about this on the internet, but it is a fact that obviously the police wanted a forensic sample of Madeleine from a hair or from saliva or something like that. There was nothing, zilch, nada, nothing at all. And because of that, Jerry McCann had to be sent off back to England a few weeks later to get a sample of her DNA from her pillow at the home in Leicestershire. Now, it's a great puzzle to all of us as to how Madeleine could have been in that flat for 6 days, sleeping on a pillow, sleeping on a bed, hairbrush, hairs here, there, and everywhere. How come? Can you help me on this? How come there is no DNA at all in that flat of Madeleine?
So, I mean,
incredible.
Two things spring to mind for me, Tony. The first thing would be that, A, she wasn't there at all, right? And the second thing would be that there was some kind of professional cleanup done following her disappearance, like that they bleached the place or they totally decontaminated the place. Do any of those theories hold true to you, Tony?
Let me put it this way: there is no actual evidence of any clean-up operation having been carried out.
They would know that, right? Would they?
All I can say is that let me put it this way: it's a mystery that needs an answer, and I can't supply it really. I can't supply the answer, but what is the answer to the fact there's no DNA of Madeleine in the flat at all? Not even a hair. It does seem surprising, doesn't it?
Especially on the account that they were allegedly visiting, going to check on the kids every either 15:30 or 1 hour. In order for someone to break in there, leave no trace whatsoever, other kids not to hear a peep, see a peep, scream or anything, and then there's none of her DNA in there. That is just a very, very kind of flimsy,
convenient,
answer to this, in my opinion.
Just coming back to you mentioned the PR aspect. It wasn't only Clarence Mitchell who came down on behalf of the British government. The company that ran the holiday, organised it, Mark Warner, was represented by one of the most powerful, and if I dare say, one of the most evil PR companies that's ever existed, called Bell Pottinger. Does that ring a bell at all?
Not personally. Can you tell us a little bit about them, Tony?
Bell Pottinger represented the great and the good in this country and elsewhere. They also represented a series of very corrupt regimes in Central Asia and Africa, and they came to grief last year. You can look it up on the internet, when they represented a very, very dodgy South African politician and lied through their teeth about this man. And that was eventually exposed by some good work done by researchers in South Africa, and the firm has since collapsed. But in its time, it was the most powerful media company in Britain. And when Madeleine McCann was reported missing, the very next day, the managing director and his assistant came down to Praia da Luz and did various bits of work on the case. So it kind of illustrates that this, the PR involvement was extensive, and also lawyers, of course. Lawyers were hired immediately as well, which you wouldn't normally do if you've just lost your child, would you? Yeah. You wouldn't rush for the nearest lawyer, would you?
That seems fishy to me. Can you just remind me of the name of the PR company again, please, Tony?
Bell Pottinger.
Bell Pottinger, right? Okay. Do you know
Bell Pottinger?
I've done projects for them.
You've done projects
where
for
they've had press releases. They've come through us. They need it in XYZ for XYZ country, and we put it into a language for them.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, I mean these guys are huge.
Let me just tell you one fact while we're on that before we move on to something else. The boss of Bell Pottinger was called Tim Bell, and he boasted that he had been paid £500,000 by the McCanns to, and the quote was, to keep Madeleine on the front page for 12 months. So £500,000 paid by the McCanns, or perhaps by their fund, because they set up a fund to try and find Madeleine. So either the McCanns or the fund paid this PR giant £500,000 just to keep Madeleine on the front page for the next 12 months.
That's really fishy. Wow.
But it's also incredible, isn't it? The amount of planning and the strategy that went into just of course it's cold, but that went into this. I mean, a lot of people they just think, okay, the press turned up, they got their story, and bang, away they went, and the narrative continued. But there was a lot of manipulation going on.
Let me just add to that, because you've touched on again another thing. This is a fact that almost nobody knows about this case. On the 8th of May, Tuesday the 8th of May, which is barely 4 days after Madeleine had been reported missing, a very high top-level group of people met under the chairmanship of the Chief Constable of Leicestershire Police at the time, Matt Baggett. in order to monitor the Madeleine McCann case. Now, so this committee was set up in place already on the Tuesday, the 8th of May, under the chairmanship of Matt Baggett, the Chief Constable of Leicestershire Police. Now, we know from reports that, guarded reports that were published on the internet. Are you still there?
Yep. We are indeed, sir, yeah.
Yep. That were reported on the internet many years later, that the committee consisted of 12 agencies, the Home Office, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, MI5, similar organisations. Now, the rationale for this was said to be in order to control the publicity. But surely on the 8th of May, the priority was to find Madeleine McCann, wasn't it? I mean, everybody's looking out, the police are looking out, the public are looking out in Portugal.
So fishy.
Why would you need to get top civil servants from the Home Office, the Foreign Office, all these other agencies, the police? Why would they need to be there just to control the publicity?
And is that unprecedented? It's never happened before where all of these, major, UK institutions sort of came together. I'm assuming it's unprecedented, right? I can't say there's never been a similar case, but not that I'm aware of. And yeah. I think the word unprecedented could be used about many aspects of this case. Yeah.
The involvement of all these lawyers and PR people, as well as MI5, the special branch and so on. Incidentally, just on that topic, the Portuguese detective who ran this investigation for 5 months, Gonçalo Amaral, wrote a book on the case. Are you aware of that?
Yes, yeah, I am actually. Yeah.
He wrote a book on the case called "The Truth of the Lie." I'll tell you more about that as we go on. But he was in his book. You'll find that he couldn't believe the number of British security officers and police officers coming. He couldn't find space for them in his offices. They were trying to muscle in on the whole thing all the time. And in fact, that was the reason why he was kicked off the investigation, because
railroaded.
In September that year, he vented his frustration in private to a journalist. Poured his heart out and said, look, the British MI5 and the police, they're hampering my investigation. They won't let me do this. They won't let me do that. And unfortunately for him, the journalist knew a good story when he saw one. And so he didn't treat it as private, but blasted it over the Portuguese media.
Oof.
With the result that embarrassment was caused, and he was removed from the investigation a few weeks later.
Yeah, Tony, because I remember the narrative in the UK press were that the Portuguese police were incompetent, that they didn't know what the hell they were doing. But it sounds from what you're saying like they were hamstrung at every turn to get their bloody job done.
Right. Let me answer that as follows. If Madeleine McCann really was abducted, then they probably didn't do the best job in the world. If, on the other hand, she wasn't abducted and she died, then they did a very good job under the circumstances. And
right.
If you go to the internet, an American prosecutor and child expert, Wendy Murphy, gave a very good resume of this point, and said that in her opinion the case was that Madeleine had died, but she also made the point that she thought that Gonçalo Amaral had done a brilliant investigation under very difficult circumstances. And I've got here in my hand a 10-page report by Gonçalo Amaral's deputy, the Inspector Tavares de Almeida. Now, not going to read out all of that, but if you have a look at that, it's quite clear that they went through this case with a fine-tooth comb. Let me just give you a flavour of the headings on this report, and you can get it on the internet. Anybody can search for it. The McCanns worked on their account of events and developed it. Then the next heading we have a bit further on, the media coverage. Again, how they were hampered by the media coverage. Then there's a bit about the cadaver dogs. And at the end, they say strong evidence that the crime scene was altered. And then they list a whole page, I won't go through it in detail, the facts that point to Madeleine's death in the apartment. And then at the end, they carefully document their conclusions with evidence. And it's quite clear that this is a very, very thorough report based on their assessment of the case. So if Madeleine really was abducted, then you could argue that the police had failed to do certain things. But if in fact she wasn't, they did a very, very difficult job under very adverse media publicity, because the media was jumping on them all the time, saying that you haven't done this and you haven't done that.
So Tony, I'm interested also in some of the other people that were on that trip, the Tapa 7. Did we hear anything from them? Were there any witness accounts? Anything that led along that night that people said happened? You talk a little bit about the rest of the people as part of that crew, not just Madeleine McCann's parents.
Well, there were 4 families of 2 adults, and there was 8 children between them. And one of the party took along their granny as well. As I said to you, 4 out of the those 8 people were doctors, and they were involved to a certain extent in supporting the McCann's story. And I'd like, if I may, just to take a minute or so just to go through one example of this, because one of the crucial evidential features of the case was an alleged visit by one of them, Dr. David Payne, to the McCann's apartment at about 6:30 in the evening, the night Madeleine was reported missing. So this was 6:30, just before they all went down for dinner. And both Kate McCann and David Payne gave evidence that of this visit by Dr. Payne to the apartment. And Dr. Payne, in his statement, says that he saw Madeleine alive at this point and the children at 6:30 p.m. Now, when you look at their statements, they are violently contradictory about this visit. I've actually made a list of 20 of them. Let me just start with the first 3. When Dr. Payne first mentioned this visit, he said it took place at 5 o'clock. This was later changed to 6:30. When he first made the statement, he said that Jerry and Kate McCann had both been there. Then he changed that to saying it was just Kate McCann. Then there were other contradictions. For example, David Payne said he was there for up to 30 minutes, whereas Kate McCann said, no, I was in the shower at the time. I came to the front door, could only just speak to him through the door, and he went away. He never entered the flat. So I could go on and on with all the other 17 contradictions, but there's no way that visit ever happened.
Massive discrepancies.
In my opinion, it didn't happen. And actually, the Portuguese investigator didn't agree either that was evidence of Madeleine being alive. He dismissed that. Okay. Because obviously, if 2 people are so contradictory about an event that's supposed to have happened, either one of them is lying completely and the other is not, or vice versa. But the most likely explanation is that the visit was made up in an attempt to prove that Madeleine was alive at 6:30.
Right.
Absolutely. Can I ask a question? And this might be a little bit of a curveball, but the other parents, they had children as well, right? This Tapa 7.
Yes, they did.
And were they all left alone in their respective rooms that night? Or were some parents more diligent than Jerry and Kate? Yeah.
Right. I will answer that by saying that according to the claims of the entire group, according to their claims, they were indeed all being left in the same way. The only slight exception to that is Dr. David Payne said that he had one of these intercom arrangements so that if his children woke up, they would hear it in the restaurant. But the other three, they all maintained that they'd had this checking regime all week and left their children in the flat.
So whatever happened, whatever the fucking, sorry, excuse my language, but whatever the story was, it's incompetence, isn't it? And it's on a huge scale, isn't it?
I want to interject. So do you think it's incompetent that they would leave him alone and check on him, leave him alone and check on him?
Yeah, you don't leave your kids alone at all if they're toddlers.
Yeah, toddlers is young. And
I'm quite glad you've touched on that, because this makes me go into another PR angle you might be interested in, your listeners might be interested in. Please do. I agree with what you've said, that it's not the sort of thing that one normally does. And I'm a parent, I'm a grandparent. It's not the sort of thing one does. But Clarence Mitchell, the PR spokesman for Tony Blair and for the government, put it about very strongly and repeatedly that this was the British way of looking after children, that it was very common, very common, he said, for children to be left in their hotel rooms and hotel apartments and this sort of thing. Now, the funny thing was, there was a chorus on the internet of parents all over the country saying absolutely not. But there was a collection of media pundits who all rushed to say, oh yes, it's the sort of thing I did with my children as well. It was almost as if though the media celebrities all joined in to say, well, yes, of course, this is the British way of doing things.
May I ask a question, Tony? Do the McCanns or any one of those Tapper 7 that night have connections in high places? Have kind of either media or government or kind of royal connections? Is this where the cover-up's coming, that they knew people?
Yeah. Many questions have been asked about that. As far as we know, the other members of what's called the Tapper 7, the other families, did not. Jerry McCann had some interesting connections with the nuclear industry, in that he was on a committee which was looking at the effects of nuclear contamination, if you like, on people. I think the committee was called COMARE, COMARE. And we believe that on the same committee was the brother of the Prime Minister, Gordon Brown. So there are some connections there. Nothing very striking, perhaps, but Jerry McCann was certainly in good favour with the nuclear industry.
So why do you think all these people were rushing to their defence? Why do you think Tony Blair had his PR people go out there? Why do you think all the celebrities were suddenly saying, "No, well, we leave our kids alone as well"? Blah blah blah. What was that? Why were they? Why were they in favour so much when clearly they're pieces of shit?
Well, exactly.
Could it be virtue signalling? I mean, now that we're in this sort of age of mass adoption of social media and just saturation of media in general.
That is a theory that's been promoted. That one theory that's promoted to explain this phenomenon is that, oh dear, there was such a big rush of publicity, we must try and do something. We must be seen to do something. So that is one possible explanation, but I'm afraid it doesn't cover why 40 people from the security services and the police and the MI5 and so on all descended ambassadors and everybody else. It doesn't really explain that degree of involvement, I don't think, anyway.
Yeah. So what do you think does explain that then, Tony?
I've got to be careful here, obviously, because as I think you know, I'm under a court order and I'm not really at liberty.
Let me rephrase that.
Bad boy.
What are some of the alternative theories of why this is, why it is, or why it was what it was?
Right. One theory is that, as you've suggested, that perhaps Jerry McCann was playing on connections with the nuclear industry. The McCann's main lawyer had a big connection with the nuclear industry as well. He worked as the legal officer for British Nuclear Fuels, so that's one line of attack. I can only say that some of us think that there must be something about this case which involves something immoral or illegal. In other words, to explain this level of involvement, the PR, the lawyers, the secret services, there must be something connected to this case somewhere.
I mean, I don't want to go full on,
conspiracy theory.
Yeah, full on conspiracy theory. But are we talking like a paedophile ring, some kind of child trafficking conspiracy?
Because in those times, 10 years ago, it was very, very being pushed big time, wasn't it, by the media?
It was very much in the public.
Yeah, I mean, this is the new boogeyman that you needed to watch out for, right? The resident paedophile.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass on that. I'm going to pass comment on that.
Okay.
All I will say is that is a suggestion that's made by some people.
So I think your silence speaks volumes, Tony.
So what are some of the alternative theories then of why there's this sort of army of politicians, of ministries, of police, etc., PR people involved then?
Hey, this is Mickey. Blockmesh is an awesome new TSL sponsor, and it's got a huge goal: creating the world's first decentralized, cost-free communication network. Blockmesh uses mesh networking technology where nodes connect directly to one another to route data without any kind of centralized authority. An internet connection isn't necessary either, as the node's devices communicate directly, aka meshing. The South Africa-based Blockmesh platform will allow users to communicate and transact in a peer-to-peer network without data costs or banking fees. On Blockmesh platform, you can chat while offline. It's secure and encrypted and has an ERC20-enabled wallet with offline payments. Additionally, there are 3 additional platforms on the roadmap: MeshDev, developer-focused; MeshX, incentivized Wi-Fi; and MeshAd, an advertising platform that will target ads. After a successful coin sale, Blockmesh is listed on HitBC and CoinMarketCap, and you can find out more at https. Do people actually still say that? Anyway, www.blockmesh.io. Go and check them out. Blockmesh.
Perhaps you'd like to go through the list of 43 people I've identified who rushed out there and ask each one of them the same question. I don't know what kind of answer you'll get, but
okay.
All I can say, let me put it this way: there's evidence of a highly coordinated campaign here. That this wasn't just a few individuals rushing off. Somebody, in my opinion, somebody high up coordinated this and said, "Look, there's something here that." Mustn't come out. Send the lawyers, send the PR men, send the secret services.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Tanner sighting at 9:15 that night?
I can tell you a lot about the Tanner sightings and all these sightings that there have been. So let me just briefly explain the scenario regarding the sightings. On the following morning, Jane Tanner, who was the wife of one of the doctors, she wasn't a doctor herself, but was a marketing executive. She told the police that she had seen a man walking, carrying a child, past the McCann's apartment at 9:15. Now, if you delve into the Portuguese police reports, and the one that I've just mentioned by Tavares de Almeida, the one that was done in September, it's quite clear that within a few days they didn't believe a word of what she was saying.
And so what did she say? What did she say she saw? Just a man carrying... Can you go into what?
Okay, a man, she didn't see his face, walking hurriedly, carrying a child, walking fast at the top of the road. She says she saw him for about 4 or 5 seconds, a few meters ahead, and then lost sight of him.
And so why was she discredited, or why did that story just fall apart like a flower?
Right, she was discredited rapidly because she kept on changing her story. I don't know how much time you've got, but let me just give the highlights. Within 9 days of that, she was given an identity parade where she might be able to identify a suspect, and various people were asked to walk in front of a police car with a two-way mirror in it.
Yeah.
And she picked out somebody called Robert Murat as the person she'd seen on the 3rd of May.
Who's that?
Robert Murat was the first suspect, and within 2 days of Jane Tanner saying, "I'm sure this was the man I saw," Robert Murat was arrested and made a suspect. So after 10 days, we have Jane Tanner stating that Robert Murat was the man that she'd seen in the dark a few days before. Now, if we wind on a bit further, several months, for reasons which would be too complicated to go into on this show, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
She then resiled from that, and basically, although she didn't say it openly, she abandoned the claim that it was Robert Murat. And she then said that the man looked like a suspicious man with a moustache that the McCanns had identified as a suspect. And if you go to the news reports for January 2008, there was a big story, front page in the News of the World, saying, "This is the lead suspect, man with straggly hair and a moustache." Now, Jane Tanner was quoted in that article as saying that, "I think this is the man that I saw back in May." Now, can you see an obvious flaw with this? She doesn't see the man's face at all in May, yet 8 months later, in January 2008, a man with straggly hair and a moustache, she said, "Yes, that's the man. I'm pretty sure that's the man."
It makes no sense.
So, if you go through her detailed statements, and she's made many, the description of the abductor and the clothes seems to change from one to another. Now, the extraordinary thing about this is that there was a program in Britain in October 2013, so this is 6 years later, in which the Metropolitan Police claimed to have identified the man seen by Jane Tanner. And if you believe the Metropolitan Police, they produced an image of a man who had come forward 6 years later to say, "I must be the man seen by Jane Tanner." And not only that, but he was apparently wearing the same clothes that week as the man drawn by Jane Tanner 6 years previously. But to cap it all, this man said, "Well, actually, I've got the very pair of pajamas that my daughter was wearing on that occasion 6 years ago, and I've kept them, and here they are." In other words, to prove that, in an attempt to prove that he was the man seen 6 years ago.
Well, that's all very convenient.
Yeah, and actually, because of I want to say this to you while I've got, the opportunity to talk to you. I would like to say that, to my mind, this illustrates the power of the media, because that show was prepared 9 months in advance at a cost of £1 million to the BBC and £1 million to the Metropolitan Police. And I sat and watched it with some people in Harlow. And the people I watched it with didn't have the same view of the case as I did. And, they said, "Oh, yes, well, they found him. Oh, jolly good. Well, that rules him out." Now, to me, it showed the power of the media, because I think you listening to this story, the way I've explained it, you'd think, how likely is that? But a lot of people, 7 million people watched that program. Yeah. And I bet you that 6.5 million out of them would probably believe that the police were telling the truth about this man.
Yep. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, you can't expect everybody to get into the depth that you're into on this. So they see a report like that, and they take it for what they see. And then all of a sudden, that's the belief of 6 million people. And as you always say, like, it's harder to undo a lie than it is to, you're just hard to turn that around once it's in people's mind. And so that was you have to look at the media coverage in detail over, what is it now, 11 years, because I've been mentioning a few things, circumstantial evidence, dogs, this sort of thing, which are never, ever mentioned. No article in the last few years
has even mentioned the fact that these dogs were sent by Britain's top dog handler.
Mm-hmm.
It's just airbrushed that out completely. And so all of this evidence, for example, these contradictions I mentioned about this alleged visit of David Payne to the apartment, it's never mentioned in any newspaper. And of course, I've been, I'm only too aware of that because I tried to promote these things in the media, and the McCanns took me to court in the end because I kept on making allegations, and which is why I can't make any allegations today. All I can say to you is, here are some facts worth your listeners having a look into.
Yeah, no, we're glad to hear it, and we appreciate that. So after the Tanner sighting was really discredited, there was the Smith sighting at 10 o'clock, an Irish couple. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. It's a most mysterious sighting. The Mankins. Let me just give you the facts, and we'll see what people make of it. On the 15th of May, that is 12 days after Madeleine was reported missing, Robert Murat was arrested and made an official suspect. And as you can imagine, if you put your mind back to the 15th of May, wall-to-wall coverage on the media, day after day, 12 days in a row, and at last a suspect. So we had Robert Murat photographed, media comment, headline news, suspect found, may be responsible for the abduction of Madeleine McCann. Now, the very next day, Martin Smith from Ireland said that he had a sighting of a man carrying a child. So if you have a look at the connection of events. So Martin Smith said nothing at all for 13 days. And then suddenly, the next day, he rings up the police in Ireland and says, look, I saw somebody and carrying a child. So the first as anybody has heard from him. Now, the interesting thing about that is that we know, because the families admitted it, that Martin Smith knew Robert Murat. How well he knew it is open to question, but the family admitted that they'd met several times over a period of 2 years. So if you look at those facts in isolation, he doesn't do anything for 12 days. Somebody he knows is arrested and made a suspect, and the very next morning he rings up and says, oh, by the way, I've just remembered that I saw a man carrying a child. And he then told the police, I can assure you that that man was not Robert Murat. I know Robert Murat so well that although I saw somebody, that man was not Robert Murat. Now, I tend to believe, and so do many, that there's something rather strange about that. But the Smiths will tell you that they all saw a man carrying a child. And if we go back to that television program in 2013, the police put that sighting forward as the main suspect. The sighting had been forgotten about by everybody for 6 years, but suddenly the police revived it in that 2013 program, and he was, and maybe still is, the main suspect. This mysterious man.
And even that was, 5 years ago now, and he's still the main suspect?
Actually, I've been busy asking Freedom of Information Act questions, and I asked one last year, and they said that he wasn't the chief suspect any longer. They weren't looking for that man any longer.
So who is now?
I don't know. The police won't say.
Okay. Who's? I heard a story, Tony, that there was supposedly someone travelling in some kind of mobile home that might have picked her up. Is this the same guy, this Murat guy, or is that something different? Do you know anything about that?
I think I know a lot about it. I've researched this a great deal. I would only advise your listeners to completely avoid the whole thing because it's
right. Okay.
There's nothing in it. But I will just say for the record that the man concerned was called Raymond Hewlett, and he was travelling around in a sort of camper van type thing. In around about that time, he was in Portugal, and then he went off to North Africa. But the dates and other circumstances don't match at all. If you go into it, the dates don't coincide. But the theory is put forward that he could have snatched Madeleine McCann and taken Madeleine to North Africa. As I say, it's too complicated to explain why this story doesn't stand up. But the McCanns made a huge, big thing of it, because this man was, when this story came to light, he was actually seriously ill in hospital in Germany. And they made a huge thing of it. Their media people made a huge thing of it. They sent over 2 of their men to Germany to interview him, and he refused to be interviewed, and then he went again. And so for several weeks, we had him trailed as the main suspect. But
he had an alibi.
And he's since died. Died. Well, he did have an alibi. As I say, it's too complicated to explain, but it was a story that was completely developed by the McCanns. There was really no evidential support for this, but they promoted that story for whatever reason.
Can I ask a question, Tony? What about the absence of photographs? So Madeleine McCann died. What night of the week was it that Maddie died, or she was, let's say, abducted? Tony, what night of the week was that?
Day 6 of the trip. I know that, but I don't know that.
Well, let me just answer the question about the photographs.
Yeah.
And all of this is on the record, as it were. The first thing to say is that the McCanns were camera happy. If you look at what they put out on the media in the years after Madeleine was reported missing, there was videos, Christmas videos, photographs galore. They loved their children and took many photographs of the children. There's no doubt about that. They were a loving family and took many pictures. And in some of the videos, Madeleine looks very happy playing around, all this kind of thing. So it's a great mystery that there are so few photographs from that holiday. It is a tremendous mystery. Now, only 5 photographs have been produced from that holiday, which may be from that holiday. Can I just take you through them briefly?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, 5 photographs. There are 3 that we know were taken on the Saturday, on the first day. There was pictures of Madeleine playing in the playground shortly after the plane landed in Portugal and they got to their apartment. So that accounts for 3 of the photographs. That only leaves 2 photographs left. Yeah? And you'd have to say, if Madeleine was alive and kicking for the rest of the week, why do we only have 2 photographs? Yeah. Now, the other 2 photographs are one of her playing, one of her on a tennis court holding a clutch of tennis balls, which is called the tennis ball photo. And the other photograph is one of her with her father, Jerry McCann, and sister Amelie by the pool in the Ocean Club. Now, those are the only 2 photographs that exist, apart from those 3 taken on the Saturday. So you've got Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 5 days and only 2 photographs. It does seem curious.
Where do these timestamps come from? Are these? Is it just obvious on the? Yeah, sorry, Tony. You go on.
Let me just get to that briefly. Let me just get to that. I would like to say this, and again, it's all on the record. I'm not making any allegations here. This is all on the record. The tennis balls photograph was said to have been taken on either 2 or 3 different days by 2 different people. So there are various statements about how this photograph came to be taken. 2 different people said, I took the photograph, and then when it was supposed to be taken, it was either Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday. Now, that doesn't add up for some of us. So let's leave the tennis ball photo on one side. That's a curiosity. We can't explain why there are so many different stories about that photograph. That only leaves us with one photograph, which the McCanns say was taken on the Thursday at lunchtime by the pool. Now, again, if that's correct, you've got Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, without any photographs, and you've only got 1 photograph from Thursday, this one pool photograph. So that again seems very curious.
Yeah, from parents who are super snap happy, as you call
on
it.
a holiday, exactly, nonetheless. Yeah. On a beach
digital
holiday.
Cameras, all the rest of it. The other strange thing about this pool photograph, which has been investigated by a British expat policeman who lives in Spain, he went through all the weather data. Now, the curious thing about this last photograph is that if you look at it on the internet, you'll see Jerry McCann in sunglasses, shorts and T-shirt, the children wearing sun hats, and dipping their toes in the water, all this kind of thing. It's obviously a warm, sunny day. There's no doubt about that. The curious thing is that when we look at the weather for Thursday, as all the weather reports and the satellite data admit, it wasn't a hot, warm, sunny day. It was cloudy and cool and windy. The only day that week that was sunny all day long was the Sunday. So there are some who say, well, was this photograph taken on Sunday? And some people say, well, was the date of the photograph changed, the date and timestamp, which I understand. I'm not an expert on digital cameras, but I understand it's very, very easy to do that. So
yeah, and I think it's important to say, Tony, that in itself would be flimsy evidence, and it could be subject to many kind of theories, and maybe the cloud broke for a couple of minutes that day and the sun shone through, blah blah blah. So yes, alone, okay, I can understand it. It's questionable, but not when it's lined up with all these other pieces of information.
Well, I would only say that, you have to look at every piece of information, and often they conflict. There are two stories, and they don't always match up, and you have to use your investigative skills to work out, what's right and what's wrong, and it's a very difficult thing to do, as there are so many changes of stories and contradictions. But as I say, the photographs is an issue. I quite agree with you that there could have been a gap in the clouds for a few minutes on that day. We're looking at probabilities here, likelihoods,
Yeah.
So how likely is it that the photograph was taken on Thursday? The evidence would appear to be unlikely, but I agree with you, not impossible.
Yeah, not impossible, but again, and I must stress, Tony, that I'm talking about all the pieces of information together. And that's what just makes this case so bloody compelling to me. So absolutely compelling.
One thing that we haven't really delved into, and this was another matter that occupied a lot of my time many years ago.
Yeah.
And that is some very curious things about the McCann's private investigators.
Right.
Which your listeners might not know about. And I think that's one area I'd like to mention. In September, after the McCanns were made suspects, that was on the 7th of September. It's my 60th birthday, so I remember it very well. The McCanns then were very much needing extra support from lawyers and PR men and that kind of thing. And they also then turned to private investigators. And again, I'll throw a few facts at you, which, and when I've gone on for too long, you can stop me. But the very first agency they turned to was a Spanish detective agency called Metodo 3, which means Method 3. Now, you look at all the reports that we obtained about this agency, and they were they were from Barcelona, by the way, and they were the dodgiest detective agency in the whole city. A reputation for running close to the law, very poor reputation amongst their fellow professionals, and so on. Now, they were hired for several months, and one of the most extraordinary things about their involvement was a claim made by their boss, a chap called Francisco Marco, who, in the run-up to Christmas 2007, when there was still huge publicity at about Madeleine McCann, he made a claim in the papers. He said, "My men know where she is." Now, this was pumped up hugely, front page in all the daily newspapers. Boss of this agency, hired by the McCann's private agency, "Me and my men, we know where she is." Yeah, very bold claim to make. Yeah.
Yeah.
A week later, more statements from this man, Francisco Marco, who said, "We're closing in on the kidnappers." very, very, very definite, closing in on the kidnappers. So more headlines in the British press, yeah? Then, finally, he made another statement, similarly saying, Maddie will be home by Christmas. This was pumped up, again, hugely in the newspapers. Now, all of this, I must tell you, was complete and utter lies. I'm able to say that on your program because it's been admitted. They're all completely made up stories, obviously for media consumption.
But
that's insane.
What prompted him to do that? A self-interest, or did someone else?
Well, he was being paid a lot of money by the McCanns.
Right. Oh, okay. This is all coming together then, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they paid Metodo £750,000 for their work over 6 months. I think they were on a retainer. If you have a look at the evidence, they were on a retainer of £50,000 a month.
Tony, may I ask you a very quick question? How much do you think over the course since 2007 have the McCanns made in terms of cash altogether? Well, round it all up. How much do you think?
Well, it depends what you mean by made. I think that's probably the way you put the question is rather difficult to
put you on the spot.
The
net.
Well,
net.
When you say that, well, the main vehicle they had for spending this money, and I've already mentioned to you that they spent £500,000 paying for the services of Bell Pottinger, another £250,000 for Metodo 3, this group, more money spent on lawyers. Now, most of that money came from public donations.
Oh.
Wasn't the McCann's own money?
Yeah, I know.
They were raising money.
Within 10 days of Madeleine being reported missing, there was a website running and an invitation to send donations. And the whole of Britain was exercised by this story, and literally thousands upon thousands of people gave money to the McCann's fund. It was called the Find Madeleine Fund. And some of the people I now know who take a sceptical view of the case, they donated money themselves. They were caught up in this. It was the word media frenzy is sometimes used a little bit in exaggeration, but there was this media frenzy, and people sent money in droves. And in fact, there were stories of how some pensioners said they were so moved by this story that they sent their weekly pension off to the McCanns. One person said, look, I'm not very well off. I'm sending you £90 my weekly pension. There was children who got together their pocket money for several weeks and sent off a few pounds to the McCanns. It was a huge wave of emotion. Now, there was lots of organisations that donated. There were celebrities that donated. I can't remember the exact amounts now, but there was, people donating 10,000 here, £100,000 there. So, if you look at the accounts of the fund, there were millions of pounds poured into the fund, mainly from the public and from people who were charity-minded, celebrities and so on, who wanted to do their bit, as it were.
Yeah, I think we're talking at least.
So that's when you say have they made money, I think that would be unfair. They haven't, as far as I know, they haven't made any money, but they have of course had an income from. Kate McCann wrote a book on the case in 2011, which did produce an income of about £500,000, I think.
Are they back working now, Tony? Are they both back to full-time employment?
Well,
do you know?
Jerry McCann's career has developed, and he's now a professor of cardiology at the Leicester Hospitals Trust. Kate McCann vowed that she would give up work in order to concentrate on looking for Madeleine. She said that in the early weeks. She's got a post, an unpaid post, I believe, she's now the ambassador for an organisation called Missing People. So she acts as an ambassador to kind of raise the profile of this organisation called Missing People. But I don't think she gets any payment.
Mickey and Jimmy, I got a question for you guys. Where is the court of public opinion in the UK on the family, on the parents? Are people still sympathetic, or?
I think.
Right,
I'm sorry.
I think I can help you on that. I think.
Go on.
The vast majority of people. I do speak to people about this case, but the vast majority, the overwhelming majority, will go along with the official story. I'm talking about 70, 80%, 90% possibly. You will get some people who don't go into the detail, but say, well, I think some people will say, well, I think they must have been involved somehow, or I think they had something to do with it. You'll hear people say, but there's relatively few of us who've become immersed in the case and studied it in detail. So, the vast majority, if you ask 10 people on the street, probably 8 or 9 out of them would say, she was abducted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because the discussion of the details has occurred on the internet, but not in the mainstream media.
That's kind of a common thread across a lot of these true crime things. That the main narrative stays the main narrative.
Yeah, and then there's sort of 10% of the population that are in these echo chambers on these kind of web sleuth sites and on these conspiracy sites.
Echo chambers is probably quite a good idea. I wouldn't consider my efforts and those of police officers and others professionals who've cooperated. They're not part of a conspiracy theory echo chamber, but it is a little bit like that because the story doesn't go beyond the internet. You're quite right.
Actually, Tony, I'm on your side. I think it's fishy as hell. So if I wasn't actually I wasn't kind of pointing that at you when I said that, because I'm on your side. I think firstly, a loving parent would just not leave their children alone. And I think that's
I don't know. I sort of think that's not crazy. I guess the difference is 3 or 4 years old to me is a lot different, I think, than like 8 or 9 or 10. But I remember going on vacations with my parents and other family friends, and like they would go up to a hotel, restaurant, or bar, and we would hang out in the room, and they would come down and check. That's not that insane to me.
3 and
yeah, I know that's the difference. I guess is 3 or 4 is a lot different than like 7, 8 or 9.
Tony, can I ask you a question? Do you think Madeleine's still alive? Obviously, no. But
in my opinion, no. In my opinion, no, she's not.
Yeah, because there've been all these kind of aging photo fits of her and stuff that says this is what she'd look like now and blah blah. But are people just are people grasping at straws, basically?
Well, one of the things we haven't touched on at all is the fact that there is an active police investigation going on at the moment, and that began the day after Kate McCann published her book on the case. She published a book called Madeleine, about 350 pages, in May 2011, which was the 4th anniversary of Madeleine going missing. And the book had been serialised in Britain's leading daily newspaper called The Sun.
Yeah.
And we believe that Kate McCann was paid £500,000 to £1 million for that, which she says was put into the Madeleine Fund. So there's another source of income, if you like. It goes into the fund. But the book was serialised, and on the last, the end of the serialisation, well, I think it was the date the book was published. The editor of The Sun wrote to David Cameron, the Prime Minister, and said, "Look, you must set up a review. We don't know what's happened to Madeleine. You must set up a review into this case." And, of course, this was all choreographed behind the scenes, so this wasn't an instant decision. But the very next day, David Cameron said, "Yes, I've listened to this letter, this moving letter, and I will do all I can to help the family." And so the investigation was set up. Took a few weeks to get going. But since 2011, it's been going now for, where are we now, 7 years and 1 month. Now, that has cost, that investigation alone, never mind the cost of the Portuguese investigation, never mind the cost of Leicestershire Police, this investigation, which has been going on for 7 years, has cost £13 million. And as far as we can see, those of us interested in the case, it has achieved diddly squat so far. Apart from the one thing it has delivered is a hugely influential television program. promoting the Smith man as the main suspect. So the public anger is beginning to increase about money being, as it were, it seems, poured down the drain on this one case when, there are other missing children cases, and people are asking perhaps more and more, why, what is it achieving? What are they trying to do? Do they really think they're going to find Madeleine alive or solve this case? Or why is year after year money being poured down with nothing in sight? The only tangible thing we have so far is a 1-hour television program watched by 7 million people.
Do you think that investigation, Tony, would have been set up if there were no sort of previous players in either the PR side or anything, no previous sort of connections very high up into government? Do you think that would be set up or not?
What, a genuinely independent investigation?
Well, I mean, it sounds to me that just before they published the last part of the biography of Kate's book, the Sun editor went to, and obviously Rupert Murdoch is an owner of the Sun and a big contributor to the Conservative Party. But my question is, let's take out the PR gurus and everything like that. Is it unusual for the Sun newspaper to go to a government and demand an investigation or an inquiry?
Well, not that unusual, because the editor of the Sun at the time was somebody called Rebecca Brooks. And she was. Sorry?
The Ginger Minger.
Well, she certainly had red hair, yes, and a temperament to go with it.
Indeed,
but
she's a fiery one.
It wouldn't be unusual. The Sun was a very, very campaigning newspaper, and it wouldn't have been unusual. But I think to go to the Prime Minister and get a response within 24 hours would look like it was all pre-organised.
Yeah.
By the way, just now that you've brought Rupert Murdoch into the conversation, perhaps just a little thing again for your listeners to chew on. When Clarence Mitchell was employed by the government to run the publicity relations for the McCann case for a whole year until September 2008, the moment that the government said, well, we no longer need you in that, he was offered a job by the Rupert Murdoch's son-in-law.
James.
Trying to remember them. Sorry?
Oh, no, that's his son. James is his son, isn't it?
No. I'm trying to remember the name now. He ran, his name was Freud, Matthew Freud, at Freud Communications. He was the son, I think, of Clement Freud, the child sexual abuser who lived in Pride of Luge, as it happens. But obviously there are connections with the Murdoch
he's a suspect, isn't he?
Who?
Clement Freud.
Oh, Clement Freud. Well, as I say, Clement Freud's father of it's just one of those coincidences in the case. I wouldn't personally read too much into it, but Clement Freud was exposed as a serial abuser of girls, and he lived. He's
from Belgium, right? He had the sex dungeon in Belgium.
No.
Is that someone different?
No, we're going too far there. We're going too far.
Okay.
Clement Freud was a British MP. And
right.
Very
I'm
famous
sorry.
for his
I got mixed
television
up.
programs. Yeah. No. He did cookery programs on television, and he appeared on the show Just a Minute. I don't know if you know it.
I do.
The radio program. He appeared regularly on that, and he was very good actually. He often used to win it. So he was a bit of a polymath. He was good at lots of things, but it came out after he died, as these things do, that he had been molesting young girls for many years, and it's just one of those strange coincidences in this case that he should have a villa in Praia de Luz, and of course the McCanns went to see him while they were in Praia de Luz. They went to have dinner with Clement Freud.
Dun, dun, dun.
On a couple of occasions, but
Okay.
I wouldn't read too much into that. It's just one of those strange coincidences, I think.
Okay, I did have a follow-up question about the investigations and just how these sort of typically work. Is it unusual for the Sun, or for an investigation after a newspaper has demanded an investigation, for the investigation to have lasted for so long, without question, and hemorrhaging money and delivering zero results?
Yes, highly unusual. The first point that's highly unusual is that the Prime Minister has got the ability to order an investigation in the first place, because that is a police matter. The police, we've given the police the powers in this country to decide what they will investigate. Now, strictly speaking, nobody should tell the police what to do. The police have got their own priorities in terms of preventing crime and solving crime.
Yep.
You cannot have a situation where politicians, even if they're the Prime Minister, order an investigation.
It's political interference, isn't it? I mean, surely
it is.
Surely that's going to sort of set the wheels in motion, going down perhaps a side street. You know, it'll go down the main street to begin with, but it's not a truly sort of impartial investigation. There's political bias and force.
This is what I've said all along. Let me just throw into the mix, and this has been publicly admitted by Rebecca Brooks, the whatever you call her, the ginger minger or whatever.
The feisty red one.
The feisty red one. We'll stick with that one then. Yeah.
Nice one anyway for the ginger minger, Tony.
She admitted at the Leveson inquiry, which is a public inquiry, that she had threatened David Cameron, the Prime Minister, with a week of bad headlines about the Home Secretary, Theresa May, if she didn't get away and Cameron did not order a review. Now, if you look at the transcript where she was dealing with this issue at the Leveson inquiry, Lord Leveson asked her in public, did you threaten David Cameron with a week of bad headlines about the Home Secretary, Theresa May? And you must have a look at the video. It's on the internet. But basically, she winks and says, no, I would use a different word. And so Lord Leveson says, well, what word do you use then, if not threatened? She winks again and says, I would say persuaded. So, but in order for this investigation to take place, I'll tell you what was said on the record. David Cameron said, well, I've asked the Home Secretary to look into this. And the Home Secretary, Theresa May, said, well, I've asked the head of the Metropolitan Police to consider this. And the story that was put out was that the head of the Met at the time, Sir Paul Stephenson, had come to his own decision that there ought to be a review into Madeleine McCann. So the way it was spun was that this man, Sir Paul Stephenson, had made this decision completely on his own without political interference. But of course, nobody really believed that.
Got you. Can we sort of rewind a little bit and can we get back to the point where the McCanns had come back to the UK and that things were the news cycle was beginning to sort of decrease its intensity, and you know, on the case, and things sort of started to wind down. I mean, was there anything sort of obvious there that maybe the public would have been sucked into during those times, Tony, that stood out to you like a red herring as to, oh, this happened and then, you know, the case has suddenly died down? I mean, were there any red flags?
Well, the story, that's a very interesting point you've made, because the publicity on the 7th of September, 8th, 9th was huge. Let me just pick out a few points that stand out. Within 4 days, a very wealthy businessman had offered to help the McCanns.
Is this Philip Green?
No. This is Brian Kennedy.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Brian Kennedy. He's offered to help and fund a private investigation and pay for it. And he is the man who headed the private investigation for the McCanns for years. And within 2 days of him offering to help, there was a meeting on Friday let's get this right, Friday the 14th of September. That's right, Friday the 14th of September. So 4 days after the McCanns flown back, there was a top-level meeting in London, at one of the top London solicitors, where various lawyers and PR people got together and organised a kind of fight back, if you like. And that took various forms, and we don't know the details, but they were engaged to kind of fight back. No doubt give the McCanns legal advice where they stood on things like extradition, for example. That would have been one issue. And that was followed...
Of course, that would be sort of used as some sort of... That legal framework that they stood within would then have been used to sort of come back and be fed into the strategy, one would guess, yeah? The PR strategy.
Yes, correct, yeah, correct. If I look back, the main thing that happened over the next few months was a procession of stories, many of them, if not most, developed by the McCanns, of sightings here, there and everywhere. Now, I've mentioned to you already one very prominent sighting, that is the man with the moustache and the straggly hair. Now, that again, it's hard to summarise, but that was put together with the help of the Portuguese police and the British police in Leicestershire. It was a joint effort, and that was a major story which ran for many days. A new suspect, all on the lookout for the man with straggly hair and a moustache, that kind of thing. So, there were many stories like that, really not just over those few months, but carrying on in 2009, 2010, and so on. So that was the major feature. I would like to highlight one particular development, which I believe illustrates many things in this case, and that is the search for Madeleine's bones in the lake in Portugal. Do you remember that at all?
I do.
Yeah, there was 2 weeks, one in late January 2008, and the other the second week of March 2008, when there was huge publicity about a search for Madeleine's bones in the Aradi Dam, a lake, dammed lake in southern Portugal. And it was engineered, this was the idea of a man called Marcus Aragoa Correa. He was the man who organised the first search for the bones and the second search for bones. Now, this is important, so don't interrupt me for a minute or so we get these details correct.
Go on.
Marcus Aragoa Correa was, and he's admitted this on the record, was employed by the McCanns. There's no doubt about that. He said it on many occasions. He was employed directly by the McCanns from about November 2007. Now, on the 10th of December, this is all on the record, on the 10th of December, Marcus Aragoa, who was a solicitor from the island of Madeira in the Atlantic Ocean, travelled to the Aradi Dam. 10th of December, this is about 6 weeks before the search for Madeleine's bones. Now, also at that meeting was one of the Metodo 3 dodgy investigators, a man called Antonio Jimenez Razo. Now, let me just tell you briefly, Antonio Jimenez Razo was arrested 2 months later in February on suspicion of drugs offences and police corruption. And it turned out he was involved with a 27-strong gang of drug dealers in Portugal, and he spent 4 years in jail, although I must say he was eventually acquitted. But obviously the McCanns got rid of him as soon as this story came to light. But basically, if you can picture the scene, at the Aradi Dam on the 10th of December are Marcus Aragoa Correa, who's employed by the McCanns, and Antonio Jimenez Razo, who is employed by the McCanns and Brian Kennedy. So both men are at this dam, paid by the McCanns. What are they doing at this dam 6 weeks before the search for Madeleine's bones? Each of the men had travelled several hundred miles, presumably paid by the McCanns Fund, to be at the Aradi Dam and to have a chat. Yeah. Again, all on the record. Why were those two men there? Who sent them there? Why were they there? And what connection does that have with the fact that there was a search for Madeleine's bones 6 weeks later? What I'm trying to say to you is this search for Madeleine's bones was, in effect, paid for by the McCanns.
Incredible.
It's all, you can find this written up on the internet. There's no great secret about it, but you'd think in a way that this would be the kind of story that there would be a documentary about, you know? I mean, it's crying out for a documentary, isn't it, on mainstream television? What were these two men doing at the Iradi Dam? Marcus Aragoa Correa, paid by the McCanns, Antonio Jimenez Razo, paid by the McCanns. What were they doing there? What were they planning? Yeah? But no, nobody will touch it. The only place you can find out about this amazing story is on the internet.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, there's going to be one likely result from that damn investigation, right?
No doubt.
Do you have a question, Willy, or do we want to start to look at sort of motives, and let's assume, you know, if the McCanns were involved in that, why it happened, and I mean, could this just been an accident gone wrong, for example, or, you know, I mean, who knows? Who knows? Can we sort of go into that area, Tony? Or
I will answer it a different way. I will answer it, but by taking a slightly different point. How many cases have there been where a child has died and the parents have covered this up with an abduction story? How many have there been?
It's very common, isn't it, to hear that?
I mean, there's one or two in the news at the moment. I could give you some names of similar stories in America and in Britain and in many countries.
Well, John Bennett as well. John Bennett, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes, absolutely. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming that he was killed by a member of the family.
Sure.
It could have been the father, it could have been the mother, it could have been the son. We don't know. The brother. Yeah, the brother. That's right. He probably had a motive, I would think, with all this attention on the.
You should listen to. You should listen to our podcast.
Yeah, we're not talking about Burke. We're talking about Bill Ramsey.
Anyway, please go on. Please go on. There's absolutely
in that
abduction.
case. In that case, sorry to go back to John Bennett Ramsey, because that shows the extent to which people invent stories. I mean, I would say that the John Bennett Ramsey story is even more unbelievable than the Madeleine McCann one in a way, because there was a body in the cellar, and the claim was that the person who killed John Bennett Ramsey had crept into the house in the late hours of Christmas Eve and had done something terrible to the girl, and then dumped her in the cellar and walked out without leaving a trace in the snow outside. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so what I'm saying is that unfortunately, accidents do happen. Some of these are murders, some of them are accidents, but there are many, many, many cases, and we've been having a look at them. They pop up every few months everywhere where a child goes missing. And it turns out, sometimes many, many years later, that the child has been murdered, or that there has been a tragic accident which people are trying to cover up. If I can just take up a minute or so to give you one of those examples, which
Please.
is very relevant to the Madeleine McCann case, and that is the case of Eugene and Jeanette Zapata. Now, Jerry McCann first brought this case to public notice because in the Jeanette Zapata had gone missing, and Eugene, the husband, told lies about what had happened to her, said she'd gone missing. And Jerry McCann quoted this case in October 2007 because in that case the judge had ruled that he would not accept the evidence from the dog handler. Now, the dog handler in that case had demonstrated by his dogs that there had been a corpse at one location in the house and then miles away in a cabin somewhere. The dog had been taken and alerted in both those places, suggesting that Jeanette's body had been moved from a place in the house to a cabin many miles away. Now, the judge in that case said that he could not accept the dog's evidence because there was no real proof that the dog's alerts were 100% reliable. So he threw it out of the court case, and Jerry McCann and his lawyers seized onto that and said, well, there you are, here's a judge saying that the dog's evidence is unreliable. Now, we all forgot about the story until 4 months later. Eugene Zapata made a full and frank confession. We don't know why he did, but he made a full confession. And in his confession, he explained that, yes, he had killed his wife in the lounge, put her body somewhere else in the house, and then taken it to this cabin. So in that case, which Jerry McCann quoted, the dogs had been 100% accurate. The dogs had alerted to the past presence of a corpse in the Zapata's house and then in this cabin a few miles away. So they weren't that unreliable in that case, were they?
So why isn't the dog evidence?
Accurate.
Why isn't that's not considered forensic evidence? Is it?
Actually, I was just reading on the internet this morning. I mean, we've been having a look at the things that these dogs can do is unbelievable. Explosives, they can distinguish between different kinds of explosive. Drugs, they can distinguish between heroin and cannabis and cocaine. It's used in hospitals now to detect cancers and other medical conditions. And I got this straight off the internet this morning. There's a news story about how dogs' alerts are helping beekeepers to detect disease in bees. There's a particular kind of smell given off by some kind of bacteria in the bees, and the beekeepers are using sniffer dogs to track this so they can deal with any illness in the bee colony.
Wow.
So Jerry McCann famously gave an interview in which he dismissed the dog's evidence as he said the words were incredibly unreliable. But
not the case.
Why are explosive experts, police officers searching for drugs, hospitals and beekeepers using these dogs? Because they are they are incredibly accurate.
So let's get back to motives and reasons why. I mean, obviously Jerry, if you were to look at it with a very, well, I wouldn't say skeptical, but if you were to look at it with an alternative theory in one's eye, Jerry had motive for pushing people off the scent, pardon the pun, of the cadaver dogs, right?
It's the same with, when you say motives, I'm trying to say to you, by looking at all these other cases, of which there are dozens, if hundreds, where a child has gone missing. The motive is desperation to cover up something which shouldn't have happened. If it had been just an accident, if Madeleine had fallen off a chair and cracked her head, shall we say, and suffered serious injury or died, why would you not take the child to the hospital?
Sure.
Yeah.
Especially given the profession that both parents are in.
Yeah. They're all doctors. So it has been suggested. In fact, the detective who wrote the book on the case said that we've got no evidence that anything other than an accident happened. And to be honest, neither have I, nor has anybody else. We just don't know. But it seems to me and a lot of us unlikely that it could have just been an accident if indeed she has died. And I'm not saying that she has, but I'm just saying that if she has died, then to my mind it must be more than just an accident, if you see what I mean. And so there must, if she has died, and again I emphasise I'm not saying that she did, but if she did, then there must surely be something more than an accident, is the way I would put it.
Sure. Tony, have you heard the John and Tony Podesta link? I know it's very tenuous, and I'm pretty sure that you're going to say this is complete bullshit, but I think our listeners would be extremely interested to hear your thoughts on that particular angle.
Well, what is completely inaccurate is a ridiculous claim which was put forward by a completely off-the-wall conspiracy organisation that the Podestas were actually in Pride Loge in May 2007. Now that's easily capable of being disproven and is complete nonsense. Now, all All that I will say is I can only suggest that people go to the internet and look these things up. But one of the very, very curious developments in this case, which we've not discussed at all, is that in July, early July 2007, this is only 8 weeks or so after Madeleine's been reported missing, Jerry McCann took a trip to Washington for 5 days. Now, I mention this because he spent most of those 5 days with a chap called Ernie Allen, who is the top bloke in an organisation called the National Association for Missing Children. I've not quite got the words right, the National Committee for Missing Children, something like that. He's also so important that he's also the chairman and chief executive of the international campaign for missing children. It's called ICMEC, International Campaign for Missing and Exploited Children. I think I've got the title right. I would suggest to you that a worthy study would be this man Ernie Allen, because his connections are very interesting. He has got an indirect connection to the Podestas. He's got certainly direct connections to Richard Branson, for example, who offered to help the McCanns, and I just find it we find it curious that he should, in the midst of all this effort to find Madeleine, why he would spend 5 days in the company of Ernie Allen, who does have indirect contact with the Podestas, or indirect associations with the same people. I only offer that for further study.
Tony,
I make no other comment.
Tony, you're being provocative. You're being provocative, my friend.
No, I'm here. I'm here to give facts.
Factual. He's being factually provocative.
I love it because
please check it out on the internet. He spent 5 days in Washington with Ernie Allen, chatting to him, going to meetings, and so on. Ernie Allen. Just have a look at Ernie Allen's connections.
Okay.
And there's me just thinking you were just going to shut it down, Tony. And you've given us a little bit of a slither to hang on to there.
Well, can I just sort of progress with the
Go on, Jimmy.
the
Go ahead,
motives
Sunshine.
and things? Because there's a few things that have always sort of troubled me. That, I mean, obviously we've seen the media face of John and Kate. You know, Kate's written her book, you know, which I'm sure was stewarded by the public relations company to some extent, or a publishing company. But I mean,
I dare say there was a proofreader. Yeah. Okay.
Right. So, but I mean, what really, fundamentally, what sort of characters are we dealing with here, John? I mean, I don't think they're inherently evil. I just said John. Sorry, Tony. I don't think they're inherently evil, but have they sort of given anything away? Drop their hand, so to speak. Of, that they could be sort of very manipulative people, or anything like that,
sure
outside of the public arena.
I think they're one manipulative.
I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be honest here and say this. Actually, I've looked at the photographs of Madeleine McCann and the children, which the McCanns have put out. Still photographs and videos, and what I see is 3 happy, well looked after children.
Sure.
And I've also looked at the 3 photographs which are taken on that holiday, right? Of Madeleine in the playground. There's a picture of a very nice, happy family picture. Jerry McCann is swinging Madeleine around, and 1 or 2 other children watching. Yeah, happy scene. Then there are 2 more photographs which we know were taken on a Saturday of Madeleine playing in a Wendy house, standing by the Wendy house, looking at it. Now, that is an authentic, happy child on holiday, exploring new territory.
Yep.
Family all happy in their new surroundings. So there's nothing really untoward that appears to have happened in their background. The only thing that's slightly unusual about the McCanns is that all their 3 children were born by IVF procedures.
Oh yeah,
I
just remembered.
In vitro fertilization. That's the only unusual thing, and
I completely forgot about that.
So some people are interested in that. But all I can say is that given that this is a happy family with 3 happy children, and they're happy on the journey out to Pride Illusion, they're happy in the playground there, that all I can say is if something untoward happened, and we don't know what it might be, it might have been an accident, it could have been, who knows, but obviously if something untoward has happened, which can't be explained to the hospital, then there is going to be the need for a cover-up.
Just as another alternative theory, I mean, is it possible, or how possible do you think it is, Tony, where an accident did happen, and then because they're on foreign soil in a relatively small town in Portugal, that there was just this onset of panic, and they came together, with the group of 7, and said, "This is what's happened. People are not going to believe us. We need a narrative."
Well, doctors are known to cover each other for each other. So are friends. So. What? As I say, I don't say that she is dead, but if she is dead, then the natural inclination would be, look, let's find a way out of this. There must have been some reason why a cover-up was put in place, if that's what it was, but I don't know. I don't know what happened. Nobody actually knows.
Okay.
Nobody knows what happened if she is dead.
So,
and nobody knows why.
Okay, so are there any other credible theories, alternative theories that we haven't discussed, and that have come up? And is there any new evidence that's come up in recent years?
To be absolutely fair, a third alternative is pushed by a few people. It forms the centerpiece of one book about Madeleine McCann, and that is that she wandered off. So abduction is one possibility, death is another, but wandered off has been put forward by a few people. It doesn't seem to be a very credible theory, and
it doesn't, especially with the cadaver dogs as well.
Yeah, I think the thing is, when you add either one of these theories in there, and you try and be devil's advocate, don't you? So you say, oh, well, maybe she wandered off, and you try and give them I'll tell you what there is. You try and give them the benefit of the doubt.
Of course,
that's what you do, and you say, well, maybe she wandered off, but there's cadaver dogs. Well, maybe this happened to her, but they weren't fucking looking after her. Well, maybe this happened. Well, there's just too many negative and black strikes against the name for me, Tony.
You've touched on an interesting point there, because when the investigation was launched by the Metropolitan Police in 2011, any police investigation into something as serious as a disappearance will have what's called a remit.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that somebody high up will set the parameters of the investigation. Now, most investigations of a missing child or a death of a child would be go anywhere, find anything, pursue every line of inquiry. In other words, no limit. So the senior investigating officer would be free to go wherever he thinks the evidence leads him. Now, this was not the case in the Metropolitan Police investigation, because the Detective Chief Superintendent, who was the overall man in charge of this Madeleine McCann review, came up with a limited remit, and so the investigating officers could not go wherever they wanted to. The remit was investigate the disappearance of Madeleine McCann as if it was an abduction that hadn't happened on British soil. So the remit, and the police officers cannot go beyond a remit. If they're set a remit, they're not allowed to go beyond it. So the remit set by the boss of the Metropolitan Police was, you are only allowed to investigate the abduction. You do not look at the parents, and you do not look at their friends. And that is putting a limit on an investigation, which some people would say was not appropriate. It's certainly highly unusual.
But But that must have just been a limit then on the UK police that were involved. I mean, surely they couldn't have put that remit on the Spanish police, right? On the Portuguese
police. Yeah. No, indeed not. No, indeed. I mean, the Portuguese police conducted a very thorough investigation into all these things, and I read out part of the report by the deputy inspector. It was a very good, well-written, well-argued report. Of course, when it got to the final report, the police and the Attorney General decided that there was not sufficient evidence to charge anybody. And so the Portuguese police has archived this case many years ago. And are not currently...
Sorry, Tony, go ahead.
Well, they're not currently conducting any investigation. They are merely cooperating with whatever Scotland Yard, the Metropolitan Police, wants them to do.
Okay, but I'm just sort of thinking about the UK police remit, and how much of an impact that could have had on them steering the investigators in Portugal, right? Or could it have? You know, I think sort of getting to conspiracy theory time now.
There is no active investigation going on by the Portuguese police. A few people think there is, but there is nothing. The only thing they're doing is cooperating with Scotland Yard and with the Metropolitan Police. And
sure.
I don't know if you remember this. There was in 2014, we talked about 4 years ago. There was a dramatic week. In fact, I think it was 2 weeks, 2 separate weeks, where I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember the helicopters being sent to look at a patch of spare ground in Praia de Luz, and you had British police officers with pickaxes covering some waste ground in Praia de Luz. A couple of
I remember
areas.
this.
This was all heavily coordinated with the Portuguese police. The Portuguese police were not investigating; they were merely supervising the search and the dig. They provided a military helicopter, top of the range military helicopter, to scan the area with cameras from the air, all that kind of thing. But it was all done by the British police. The Portuguese police were not actively engaged in that, other than providing personnel to supervise it. And the extraordinary thing about this was that although these things are normally conducted in secret, you had television cameras all around looking at the police digging, and the end result of this was, I think they collected 6 rabbit bones, and that was it.
Fascinating. So, okay, let's fast forward to today. I mean, there's obviously some things going on. I mean, where do you see things concluding, if at all so? Well,
the Madeleine McCann investigation by the Metropolitan Police can't go on much longer. I think the public will find it very, very strange if it carries on more than, I mean, we're now 11 years on, and there's absolutely no prospect of any possible solution at all. There's nothing in sight at all. There is a group called the Madeleine McCann Research Group, which has recently sent a letter to Portugal with some new evidence, and this new evidence includes the analysis of when the last photograph was taken, for example, and the Portuguese police are looking at that at the moment. That's the only new development I can think of.
Gotcha.
Tony, if people want to look into the case, what are the best sort of resources for them to do that?
Probably the starting point for anybody looking at the case with a sceptical eye would be, first of all, to get hold of a copy of an English translation of Gonçalo Amaral's book called The Truth of the Lie, and also an accompanying documentary with English subtitles, which again covers the main contents of the book. So really, I think that there are many places on the internet where you can get information about the case. Some of it not very good information at all. Some of it completely wrong. And
all kinds of conspiracy theories. But there are places where you couldn't get good evidence. But I would make that my starting point. There have been documentaries produced on Madeleine McCann on the internet, which you can find. Go and have a look at the account by Amaral first of all, and that will probably lead you on, if you look on YouTube, to other good places to have a look.
Okay, that's and I think it's important for us to tell our listeners, Tony, that this isn't some conspiracy theory bullshit. I mean, you've spent many years looking into this, and I think you've written a book as well that unfortunately is not available to the general public. But so I think people need to look at this with more than a sort of ounce of integrity, really, because I don't know.
The people I've been working with are not conspiracy theories.
Yeah, exactly.
The main person who's really been driving this investigation is a man known on the internet as Peter Mack.
Yeah.
He is a retired police superintendent who lives in Spain, and he has done a very patient analysis of 28 aspects of the case, and he's published a free ebook on the internet. Now, I'm not saying whether he's right or wrong, but he's got very good analysis there. He's not a man who jumps to conclusions. He has police experience. He's not a conspiracy nutcase. He doesn't go anywhere near the conspiracy sites. If you Google Madeleine McCann, Peter Mack, Petermac, you will get his ebook, and it's fascinating stuff.
Oh, so you think he's a good resource for people if they want to know more about the case? He's a good place to start, right?
I think it would be very difficult to fault his research. Yes.
Cool. Excellent. And Tony, where can people where can people find you if they want to know more about Tony Bennett?
It depends why they want to find me, really.
Not for legal reasons.
My email is not a secret. People can write to me if they want to, and I'm on ajsbennett@btinternet.com.
Oh, he's just giving out his real email address there. Okay, go on, kids.
Get in contact. I've got nothing to hide. I mean, yeah.
Okay. Tony, this has been an awesome interview.
It's been great, hasn't it?
Thank you so much. And I've been riveted all the way through. And what have we done? A couple of hours there, and it's just flown by like it was 30 minutes. Thank you so much. So,
I hope I've stuck to the facts. I hope I haven't made any allegations.
Well, so do we, Tony. We don't want you locked up. But I mean, we want you to come on again. You know.
You have indeed, sir. You've been great.
You've been fantastic. Thank you.
All the best then.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you so much, Tony.
Willy, where can people find you, Sunshine?
Yeah, at Twitter, at Willy Delius. Come find me.
Jimmy, where can people find you?
As usual, I'll be probably laid down in the gutter somewhere.
Okay, you can find me at Crypto Mickey on Twitter, and you can find us at thisstrange.life, www. or at Strange This on Twitter.
Yeah.
Subscribe and review. Subscribe and review.
Tony, you've been a star. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Take care, and do tune in next week. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.